Today we are going to explore the shocking and dark life of one of America's most infamous serial killers, Henry Lee Lucas, or simply Henry. His story is so disturbing, so twisted, that it could inspire countless films and books, but we are going to go through it step by step, exploring every layer of his life, from the painful childhood that shaped him to the criminal acts that made him notorious. Henry's childhood was a nightmare from the very beginning. Born in 1936 in Virginia, he was the unwanted youngest of 9 children. Imagine a home where love is absent, where fear and pain are constant companions. Every day for Henry was a struggle to survive, surrounded by people who should have nurtured him, but instead inflicted more suffering. His mother, Viola, was a central figure in this dark environment. Sources describe her as cruel and unpredictable. She treated her children with disdain and often inflicted physical abuse on both Henry and his father, Anderson, who could not walk. The circumstances of Anderson's death are inconsistent in historical records. Some sources claim that Viola killed him in front of Henry. Others suggest he froze to death outside, alone. What is certain is that Henry lost his father at a very young age, leaving him with a profound sense of instability and fear that would define much of his early life. Viola's hatred toward Henry was evident in every action. She treated him as if he were a girl, dressing him in feminine clothes, tying ribbons in his hair, and forcing him to perform dances. Even the animals he cared for were not safe. Viola often killed them in front of him, an act that planted seeds of cruelty and confusion in his mind. One can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for a young boy to witness such acts repeatedly, with no one to turn to for comfort or safety. The abuse left lasting physical scars. On one occasion, Henry suffered a severe eye injury after being struck during a fight. Viola refused to take him to a hospital, and the injury became permanent. It was only later, through the intervention of one of Viola's acquaintances, that Henry received medical treatment. Ironically, this same man who saved Henry's life reportedly introduced him to cruelty toward animals, further deepening the darkness within him. By the time Henry reached his early teens, his own behavior began to reflect the chaos of his upbringing. At the age of 13, he admitted that his favorite activity involved harming small animals. This early exposure to violence was a tragic foundation for what was to come. By 15, he committed his first murder, a crime that remained undiscovered for years until he confessed decades later. He lured a 17-year-old girl into the woods, and when she rejected him, he strangled her. This act of violence would remain a dark secret, known only to Henry for many years. Following this, Henry was imprisoned for minor thefts. He managed to escape twice, although he was eventually recaptured. During his incarceration, he began corresponding with a woman he hoped to marry after his release. After serving his sentence, he went to live with his stepsister, Opal, while planning for the future. Despite all that he had suffered at the hands of his mother, Viola tried to manipulate him back under her control. Henry resisted, maintaining a tense and complicated relationship with her. In 1960, Henry and Viola went to a bar together. Later, at her home, a heated argument escalated, resulting in Viola's death. Henry recounted the incident with chilling calmness, showing no remorse for the act. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison for second-degree murder, but due to overcrowding, he served only 10 years before being released. After his release, Henry's troubles continued. In 1971, less than a year later, he attempted to abduct 3 young women, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence. During this time, he continued corresponding with his future wife and married her upon release, although the marriage lasted only 2 years before ending in divorce. It was during this turbulent period that Henry met Otis Toole, a fellow criminal with a dark and violent past. The two formed a strong partnership, working together in numerous criminal activities. Their bond grew, and they became inseparable in many of their ventures. Later, Henry drifted apart from Otis and began associating with Becky, a young and vulnerable girl living nearby, who gradually became emotionally attached to him. For a time, the three lived together, traveling from town to town. Eventually, they settled on a farm provided by a man named Moore, where Henry presented himself as Becky's husband. At this stage, Henry was 45 years old, and Becky was significantly younger. The contrast between their ages was striking, yet Henry continued to manipulate his environment to maintain control. Becky eventually decided to return to her hometown. Moore drove them to the bus station, and Henry returned alone the next day, claiming Becky had boarded safely. From that moment on, Becky disappeared from Henry's life entirely. A few months later, Henry was arrested for carrying a firearm. While in custody, he offered to confess to all the crimes he had committed over the past decade. He revealed details about hundreds of murders, including his mother and others. Authorities later determined that some of his confessions were likely exaggerated, but the sheer scope of his criminal history was shocking. Henry's words themselves are disturbing. He once said, "Almost every person I went out with, I ended up killing. That's just the way it always was. For me, living people didn't matter as much as the dead." Among his most infamous confessions was the Orange Socks murder, named after a woman found buried wearing only orange socks. This case horrified investigators and ultimately led to a death sentence, although Henry eventually died of heart failure in 2001 at the age of 64. Even after his death, Henry's notoriety continues. Newspapers, documentaries, and films keep his story alive. He remains one of the darkest and most disturbing figures in American criminal history. Throughout his life, Henry's story is a chilling reminder of how trauma, abuse, and neglect can create monsters. Yet it is also a cautionary tale for society, forcing us to confront the consequences of ignoring the most vulnerable among us. I am Narravia. Promise my content will never disappoint you. If you like this video, subscribing and liking it will help ensure more content like this continues. Thank you for watching.